Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, March 5th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Honeybees play a critical role in helping pollinate almond trees across the Central Valley, but this year, beekeepers saw a hit to their populations.
Commercial beekeepers over this past winter lost an average of 62% of their bees.
We'll learn more about how that's impacting us here in the Valley, but first, these news headlines. The tariffs announced this week by President Trump on goods from China, Canada, and Mexico are drawing worry among truckers. Trucking associations say tariffs won't only drive up the price of goods, but the price of moving those goods between borders. The California Report's Saul Gonzalez caught up with truckers on Tuesday at the U.S.-Mexico border as the tariffs went into effect.
So you're afraid that higher tariffs means fewer products crossing the border, maybe, and,
yes,
and less driving.
Yes, less driving. Less driving, and then now less job too. But we will sit, we can pay our bill, and then everything gonna be crushed.
Petroleum, electronics, and cars are among the imports now incurring tariffs as high as 25%. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, plans to cut back on how much the federal government spends on leasing office buildings. 4 federal government offices in the Valley are listed on the department's website for potential cuts. That includes leases for 2 Farm Service Agency offices in Bakersfield and Madera, and 2 buildings for the Internal Revenue Service in Modesto and Visalia. DOGE is run by a team led by billionaire Elon Musk. In total, the department has set its eyes on more than 700 lease terminations across the country. The department claims it could save the government an estimated $660 million. Rain is in the forecast for the Valley in the later part of this week, and snow will also fall at higher elevations. But this year's storms have not soaked the region as much as previous years. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado has this update from One Valley water source.
The Kings River Water Association isn't seeing a strong snowpack this year. Officials conducted a snow survey along areas of the Sierra Nevada that feed into the Kings River. They found about 51 inches of snow. It may sound like a lot, but the actual water content is lower than it was last year. The snowpack did improve in some parts of the Sierra last month, but conditions are still drier than they were at this time last year. The Kings River provides surface water to farmers and other users in Fresno, Tulare, and Kings counties. Right now, the state is looking at a dry summer, but officials with the Kings River Water Association hope the rain falling this week could give them a small boost. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
More than 24 officers at a Southern California juvenile detention facility are under investigation. California Attorney General Rob Bonta has accused them of organizing fights among youth at the facility in the city of Downey. Bonta says 30 officers had a role in so-called gladiator fights. The wide-ranging investigation found roughly 70 fights took place at the facility in the span of just 6 months. More than 140 youth took part in them. The state investigation began after a leaked video showed officers standing by as a 17-year-old was attacked.
KVPR's vehicle donation program brings in thousands of dollars each month to support the news and information you rely on. If you've got a car, truck, motorcycle, or boat you're no longer using, please consider donating it. The process is easy. We'll tow it away free of charge, KVPR gets a check, and you'll get a receipt for your taxes. Find out more at kvpr.org/cars or call 855-277-2346.
And now to our main story. It's that time of year in the San Joaquin Valley. If you drive by an almond orchard, you might see stacks of white boxes and maybe even hear buzzing. It's bee season. And typically, those bees are hard at work pollinating the blossoms that will soon yield almonds. But this year, farmers are struggling to find enough bees. Beekeepers across the country are reporting a shocking shortage of bees, And less bees means less blossoms, which means less almonds, and that's ultimately bad for the bottom line. It could even mean the nuts get more expensive for consumers. Maliya Ellis is covering this story as a reporting fellow at the San Francisco Chronicle. Here she is explaining why the bees are such an important part of the farming equation.
They're incredibly important. The almond crop is one of the valley's most valuable exports and one of California's most valuable exports, and honeybees are essential to almond yields. So each year around January, February, all the almond trees in California go into bloom, and during that time they need to be pollinated by honeybees or essentially they won't yield any almonds. And this has to do with some of the almond trees' biology and also kind of the early timing of the almond bloom compared to other crops. But where you have other crops that can rely on sources like wind or beetles to pollinate, but almond trees just can't. So honeybees are really the only option to make sure that these trees yield.
Okay, and you mentioned in your report self-pollinating almond trees, but that's not a huge percentage of farmers that use that, right?
Yeah, that's my impression. My sense is that self-pollinating almonds are coming onto the market, and there's something a lot of almond farmers are exploring. But for now, just your kind of normal almond trees are still the vast majority of the crop, and those need honeybees. And honeybees coming to California for the almond bloom is also a major source of revenue for commercial beekeepers. It's something like upwards of 70% of the commercial hives in the country are transported to California, to the Central Valley for the almond pollination every year. And that can make up as much as 30 to 40% of the commercial beekeepers' annual revenue. So it's kind of a mutually dependent relationship between the beekeepers and the almond farmers.
Yeah, you spoke with a beekeeper from North Dakota who lost more than 70% of their bees. Do we have an idea of what's actually causing all these bee deaths?
So, in short, right now, no, but it's something that scientists are actively looking into. The U.S. Department of Agriculture sent researchers to the Central Valley and to various beekeeping operations, including the one in North Dakota that I mentioned, to collect samples from living and dead hives. And they're currently analyzing those samples in Maryland in the lab. But there are a lot of potential factors. I talked to Danielle Downey, who's the executive director of Project Apis M. It's a nonprofit that supports honeybee research. And she mentioned something called the 4Ps, which is pesticides, parasites, pathogens, and poor nutrition. And that's just kind of a schematic for the multitude of challenges facing honeybees. There are just a lot of variables at play. If you compare bees to, say, cattle, beekeepers can't control where their bees graze, if you will. These bees are kind of flying far from the hive, and they could be running into pesticides on various industrial agricultural fields, or they could be foraging for nutrition in subpar places. And it's just really hard for beekeepers to pinpoint what's exactly causing this. So it has a lot of people scratching their heads, but researchers are actively investigating.
Yeah, just to quantify how big of an issue this is, you cite a survey of beekeepers that say they have lost over 1.1 million colonies. Those are groupings of bees. So do we have an idea of the actual number of bees that have been lost?
Yes, that the Project Apis M survey, found a potentially, they called it catastrophic loss of around 1.1 million hives. And that 1.1 million hives, that a hive is the same as a colony, and there could be anywhere from 20 to 80,000 bees inside a given colony. So we're talking about, billions of bees. But another way to get a sense of it is that same survey found that commercial beekeepers over this past winter lost an average of 62% of their bees, which is a huge number. Beekeepers for a long time, because of all of those challenging factors, have already been dealing with fairly high losses each winter, between 15 to 40%, but 62% is a huge jump up and nearing or potentially reaching a level that some beekeepers feel is unsustainable, to have to recoup 60% of their stock every year and kind of regenerate it is a huge hit to their bottom line.
Yeah. In your recent report for the San Francisco Chronicle, you do have local information as well here in the Fresno area. You speak about a company that arrived with millions of bees for farmers, only to discover a huge portion of them had died. You also spoke with Ryan Jacobson. He's the CEO of the Fresno County Farm Bureau, also an almond farmer. What did you hear from him?
Yeah, so he told me he luckily was able to get all of the hives that he needed for his own almond crop, and he's not in panic mode yet. But he said he's also not going to be sure how successful the pollination was for some months because of the way that the almond crop works. The pollination happens around this time of year, but the trees don't actually begin to yield almonds until the end of May, beginning of June. And there's not really a good way for almond farmers to know if the pollination was complete or of good quality for months. So he's really not going to know for quite some time.
Anything else you'd like to add, Maliya?
I mean, almonds are maybe one of the crops that would be most directly impacted by honeybee losses because, as I said, other crops, there are workarounds. But, a lot of the honeybee researchers and beekeepers I spoke to just emphasized how essential honeybees are to the U.S. agriculture system writ large. And they just mentioned a kind of sense of alarm. And the North Dakotan beekeeper that I spoke to who lost over 70% of his bees, the way he put it was, he sees the honeybees as kind of the canary in the coal mine. And if they're dying at high rates, he's worried that this could portend something really bad about the ecosystem and the way that we do agriculture in this country. So it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on and to see if there are reforms that can be made for the sake of the beekeepers, the almond farmers, and kind of the consumers as well.
Maliya Ellis, reporter with the San Francisco Chronicle. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And that's today's show. If you enjoy listening to Central Valley Daily, help support the show and leave us a 5-star rating in your podcast app. We appreciate your support. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.